Your pastor, preacher, teacher, leader is not perfect. Even though they wear the title of minister, pastor, a prophet, evangelist, whatever, just because they have that title does not mean that they are perfect. The only person that we know is perfect is Jesus, right? And we all need Jesus, okay? And today I want to have a conversation about being around leaders that act like they're perfect, and then sometimes us putting pastors, preachers, leaders on a pedestal of perfection and the consequences of that. Welcome back to another episode of the You, Me, and Jesus podcast, where we talk about all things you, me, and Jesus. I am me, King, and your host, and I'm always talking to you about my life, my journey with God, and all the things. And even me, as the host of this podcast, no perfection, zero perfection. Okay. Zero, 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 zero. Okay. So just want to clear the air about that. But I love being able to come on here every single week and just share about my relationship with God, how I see God, what I hear God saying, and then just growing and trying to help you to grow as well. So I titled this episode, Titles Do Not Mean Perfection. And the reason why I decided to talk about this is because I suffered with, I don't even know what I would call it, but for years I felt like that if he was a pastor, she's a pastor, if they're minister this, apostle this, or whatever, that meant that they were fully submitted, fully walking with the Lord, kind, meek, patient, loving, all the things, right? And so like God, right? Just like God. And this hurt me a lot. And it just hurt me so much. And it took me many years of having bad experiences, to really come to the realization that just because a person has a title doesn't make them perfect, or doesn't mean that they are without flaws, or that they don't need Jesus, right? And so I wanted to just talk about it. So I'll just give you an example of me current day. So as of right now, I found a church here in Houston, and the first Sunday of the church, I was like, whoa, this church is really loud. And I'm just experiencing different things that I like and don't like, right? And if a person would have called me right after church and asked me, what did I think about the church? There's a possibility that they may not have liked what they heard me say, because I was still trying to process the fact that I went from this more quiet church in San Diego to a very, very expressive church, the entire service, not just worship, like the entire service. Didn't mean that anything is wrong with this church. It just means that here I am trying to process this, right? And if a person encountered me immediately, they were going to hear me as I am processing. And so it could feel judgmental, it could feel negative, whatever, but this is just me trying to process, right? And process isn't pretty. Process doesn't mean, oh, I got it all. No, process is process, right? Then the Sunday that the pastor was back, which was the next Sunday, I experienced different things there. I experienced, one of the things that I experienced was people were filming him, like kind of like content creators. And I was like, really? And so immediately I had this thought, right? And in my mind, I'm like, why is this about him and not about Jesus? But that's me guessing what this means. That's me assuming something. I don't even know the whole story. I never said anything, but I thought it, right? And I started to judge the pastor of like, okay, here's what he's going to be like. He's going to be like that one pastor I was a part of or whatever, But instead of leaving or whatever, I just like, Kenya, stop. You don't know why he's being filmed. You don't know what's going on. Sit down and learn. And the more that I kept hearing him teach and preach, I was just like, oh, wow, I've been looking for somebody to teach like this and to help me grow like this. Right. And, since I've been going, I just continue to enjoy being there, and I'm learning. I have my own experience with God at church and then experience with God after church. And I'm like, I'm watching myself grow and evolve in a way where I need to grow and evolve. And so it would be easy for me to assume that the pastor would understand why he, quote unquote, shouldn't be being filmed while coming into church or whatever, you know? And here's the truth. There could be nothing wrong with that. God could have nothing wrong with that. But two, God could have something wrong with it. I don't know. But it's not for me to kind of hold him to whatever standard that I want to hold him to, right? But at the same time, there has been, since I've been there, the weeks that I've been there, and I've heard him preach on some different things, he has said some things I agree with and I don't agree with. He has said some things that kind of feel like, how I have felt. I have felt like, I don't know what I felt, but it just gave me kind of hints of, ooh, I don't like that. Ooh, I don't like that. And not like me not wanting to live a holy life or anything like that. But it was just, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something. And as I was experiencing that, I had to remind myself that this is one man with his opinion, his interpretation, his style of ministry, and that's it, right? Also, I have experienced people that are at church and like they prophesy all the time. Like every Sunday they have the visitors stand up and then people get up and they're prophesying to visitors all the time. It's amazing. And I experienced some people prophesying and I'm like, ooh, I probably wouldn't have said that out loud because gosh, they put that person on blast. Right. And granted, that person is learning how to prophesy, whatever, and the way that they do it at their church, you know? And so it's like, just because they said it that way doesn't make them a bad prophet. It just means that that's how they prophesied or what they saw. And they just shared what it was that they saw. Right. And it didn't make it bad, but it just meant, ooh, you know. But also I am reminded that people are on stage and whatever, releasing their gifts. Right. But these are gifts. They're still people. That's just like you are listening and watching me right now process some of the things I've experienced. And you may be saying, well, gosh, King is judgmental. King is this. But the truth is, I'm just being a human being, right? A human being having human experiences. And I'm someone who is sharing, who is processing, who is trying to teach and encourage and uplift while also sharing all the nuances of the experiences that I'm having, right? You know, I had some people that I've been mentored by over the years. And one of the ladies I was mentored by, I loved her. I learned so much from her, with her. And we had times when I realized that her home life there was a lot going on with her daughter, with her husband. There was a lot that was going on. And then there were times when there was a lot going on with her where I was just like, how is she telling me this? But this is the fruit of that. And the whole time I had to remind myself, this is a human having human experiences where they have gifts from God. They are willingly sharing and encouraging and mentoring me, right? While having a human experience. And the same thing goes for my pastor. The same thing goes for my pastor's wife. It goes for all the leaders I'm going to experience at church. The same thing that goes for me. People that are just sharing our God experiences, also living a human experience. And I have to remind myself, and I want to remind you, that it is really important that the only person that we hold to a high standard is God. Because if we put everybody on the same level, pedestal as God, we are going to be so hurt and so disappointed. I am being reminded of, at some point in time, I am going to have a husband and he will have the title of husband. He will be leading in whatever way that he is leading. And I am going to want him to be this, right? And I have to remind myself that even though he wears the title of husband or whatever, that this is going to be a human having a human experience, right? And I am trying to mentally prepare myself for that, but I'm also kind of like, oh my God, when I think about it, because I'm like, I'm going to experience his humanness. But I'm also reminded that people are experiencing my humanness, and he's going to experience my humanness. That people in church are going to experience my humanness. You are experiencing my humanness. And it is so important that we don't put people up here because they're humans, right? And they sin. We sin. That's why we need God. That's why we have the thing called repentance, right? They are going to sin. All these things are going to happen. And we have to not have, just because they wear the title of pastor, preacher, teacher, apostle, evangelist, that they don't wear the title of perfect. Because they're not. We're not. You're not, right? And that's hard. It's a hard pill to swallow, because when you see somebody leading, you expect perfection. You expect that they are living this type of life and they're doing this, this, and this. And when you encounter them, you just have these expectations. And we have to not do that to people just because they have a title. They should be expected to live a great life, that they're preaching, whatever, 100%, right? But at the same time, we have to leave room for just the imperfectness of humans, And when we do that, I feel like we have an easier time at life. We have an easier time at navigating people, being in relationship with people, loving on people, letting people love on us, all the things, you know what I mean? And I'm new to Houston, and so I'm meeting people and connecting with people, and I'm having to constantly when you meet people, you meet the awesomeness, and then you brush up against their humanness. And I have to remind myself that's just because that is happening doesn't mean it's not a great person, right? And so I got one neighbor who loved the neighbor. I mean, she's so sweet, so kind. And I told her, you're one of the most kind, just amazing person. But she also talks a lot. I mean, and has no grid for how much she talks. And I remind myself, this is a beautiful human being. This is a beautiful person that I want to get to know and develop a relationship with. And I get to accept that this person enjoys talking, that sometimes they don't really know how much they're talking and over talking people because they're just being themselves. That's the imperfectness of that person, right? And I'm not going to try to change her. I just get to love her. I get to learn how to love her in how she is. She's experiencing me and all my humanness too. You know what I mean? And she gets to choose how she will connect with me, how she would choose to love me and accept me and all that type of stuff, right? But my whole point of this conversation is more so about leaders, that we have to just remind ourselves that just because people wear a title doesn't make them be perfect, right? So we have people that are over our country, over the world, there's over these different things. And these are just humans that are elected into a position. That's it. These people are elected into a position and they are human, period. Okay, period. And we have to remind ourselves of that. Otherwise, it's hard for us to follow people. It's hard for us to submit to people, and all the things, right? It's if I'm going, for example, my pastor, I'm coming into my church, I'm learning in my church. At some point in time, I'm going to go to new members. At some point in time, I'm going to go through that, right? And I'm going to have to submit to him and other leaders at church. And while submitting, I am going to experience their humanness, right? And I have to remember that this person, I'm submitting to their leadership, but that I'm going to experience their humanness, and it's okay, right? That they're in this position, I can submit to them, and I can also appreciate that here's their human side that's coming out, and that's okay, because my human side is going to come out too with them, right? And I have to not hold them to this standard when we're the same. They just have a title, and I get to submit to their authority and leadership in whatever arena that I am in. Okay. That's what we get to do. That's what the awesome privilege that we get to, be a part of. But we have to remind ourselves that, because otherwise, when people really start to show up, they will take us out. We will just be like, because they're human that showed up. Okay. So that's what I wanted to share today about, understanding that a title doesn't mean perfect, because a title for you, a title for them doesn't mean perfect. And it sure doesn't mean that for me. Listen, if you talk to me, you're going to experience my humanness all day, every day, as you have here on today's episode. Okay. So if you enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube, like the video. If you got questions, feel free to ask in the comments. I get notifications, so I check them. If you are listening to the podcast, please write a review. I would love to know. Many of you guys are telling me you're listening, but I don't know what you're thinking. So please let me know. I would love to know. And so thank you guys so much for listening and watching.